Hi, everybody. It's Eric Murray from the SugarHuddle.com. Well, we're one step closer to the Super Bowl. This weekend, of course, marks Divisional playoff weekend. We're down to the final 8 teams, and there's some really exciting matchups. Obviously, the NFL, we've seen a lot of parity over the years and year in and year out in the regular season, but believe it or not, over the last 5 postseasons, there really hasn't been a whole lot of parity. We've seen a lot of number 1 and 2 seeds getting into the conference title games and as well as the Super Bowl thereafter. But this is really a year that, even though we could obviously technically see, these 1 and 2 seeds make it to the conference championship games next weekend, there's just so much parity in this year's postseason that pretty much any of these 8 teams you feel pretty good about making a run and winning the Super Bowl. So it's a really, really interesting postseason that we've got here, and I'm going to go down the list and do the 4 games, kind of tell you spreads, my predictions for each game, and then just kind of break them down real quick for you. So today, we got 2 games. The 4:35 game is the Colts at the Chiefs. The Chiefs, number 1 seed, of course, in the AFC. The Chiefs are a 5.5-point favorite at Arrowhead. I actually have the Colts winning that game 34-31. The 8:15 game tonight is the Cowboys at the Rams. The Rams, the number 2 seed in the NFC, a 7.5-point favorite. I have the Rams winning that 27-20, which means I have Dallas covering. And, of course, in the first game, I have the Colts covering, so I have the road teams covering in both of those. And then on Sunday, the 1:05 game, Chargers at the Patriots. The Patriots is their 9th straight first-round bye. The Patriots, a 4.5-point favorite at home in Foxborough. I actually have the Chargers winning that game 27-24. And then the 4:40 game on Sunday afternoon, the Eagles at the number 1 seeded Saints. Saints, 8.5-point favorite inside the Superdome, but I have the Eagles winning that game 28-24. So I got a whole bunch of upsets here. Going down the line here, starting off with that Colts game this afternoon. Indy, they've come in, they've won 10 of 11. The thing about Indianapolis is they're strong on offense and defense. It's a team that for years and years and years, even when they won the Super Bowl back in 2006 with Peyton Manning and then got back there again 3 years later and lost to the Saints in 2009, they were an offensive-minded team that didn't play a whole lot of defense. And that's the way this year started. They got off to that 1-5 start before winning, of course, 10 of 11, like I mentioned. And so, they're in a position now where their defense is just as good as their offense. Their offense ranks top 5, 6, 7, 8, and a whole bunch of different categories across the board. But their defense ranks, 10th, 11th in the major categories and top 10 in some of those categories. Remember, this is a battle of the number 1 and 2 quarterbacks in the league as far as touchdown passes. Pat Mahomes with 50 this year led the league, and then, of course, Andrew Luck with 39 was right behind him. So, it's a game where you're going to have to play some defense. The last time these 2 teams faced off in the playoffs, back in 2013, Andrew Luck led that epic 28-point comeback, the second biggest comeback in NFL postseason history. They won that game 45-44 over what was then the Alex Smith-led Chiefs. That was Andy Reid's first year as the Chiefs head coach. And, that was obviously a much better Chiefs defense back then. But Kansas City, they're bottom 3rd, bottom 10 in the league in so many different categories. And, this is really a game where you're going to need to play some defense. I mean, even at home, even at Arrowhead, because we've seen with the Chiefs, this is a team that in primetime games against teams with winning records this year, they're 0-4. And they finished the year 12-4. So all 4 of their losses were arguably their 4 most meaningful games this year. Losing to the Chargers, that Thursday night game at home in Kansas City, believe it or not. At Foxborough, a Sunday night game prior to that. Recently you had that Sunday night loss at Seattle. I'm trying to think of what their other loss was, but point is, you have all these primetime losses against these winning football teams, and it just doesn't reflect well on Kansas City. So, in the playoffs, as much as this has become an offensive-minded league, we're seeing teams playing more and more defense down the stretch this season. You're going to have to play some defense to win a championship this year. You can't rely strictly on your offense. And remember, Kansas City, after the whole Kareem Hunt debacle, they struggle to run the football. I mean, Damian Williams, he's had a couple pretty decent performances recently, but overall, this is a team that's not consistently running the football well, and you're not playing a whole lot of defense. Defense is a little bit better in the closing weeks of the season, but still not great by any means. So You're asking Pat Mahomes his first ever playoff start. You're asking him to do a lot because the Colts, they're going to score points. Andrew Luck and this offense, they're going to score a whole bunch of points. Remember, in Houston against a much better Texans defense, they had like 200 rushing yards. Marlon Mack had a huge game. Andrew Luck had a couple early touchdown passes, led him down the field effortlessly, 21 first half points. So, Kansas City, you can say, well, they can win it in a shootout, but their other loss was that Monday night game against the Rams, of course, for the Chiefs. But these really good teams that the Chiefs have played, they haven't been able to beat them, and I don't think Indy, as good as their defense has gotten, I don't think this is going to be like a 45, 42, 38, 34 game. I think this is a game that's going to be, maybe in the high 20s. So Kansas City's defense is going to have to make some stops. The Colts, of course, have given up the fewest sacks of anybody, just 18. The Chiefs, they've had a good amount of sacks this year. Chris Jones, 15 and a half. He had an 11-game streak at one point that ended in Week 17. D Ford has 13 sacks himself. So those two guys are going to be huge because if they can somehow get after Luck, that's going to really kind of limit the Colts' offense a little bit, and it's going to give Kansas City a chance, especially with their offense and how potent they are. Number one offense in football, top three offense when you're talking about third and fourth down offense, as well as red zone offense. So it's going to be a really, really intriguing matchup. But one big thing, other than the defense and the struggling running game, that really goes against the Chiefs is if you look at their playoff history, since winning the Super Bowl a half century ago, they haven't been a great postseason team. They've lost a ton of games. I think they only have like 4 postseason wins, and I believe double-digit losses since winning that Super Bowl. That was Super Bowl IV over the Vikings, 69 season, January of 1970. So, they're a team that they've had a lot of those playoff games since then have been home playoff games, including a number of divisional playoff games, and they've lost. They've choked it away, and you just have to wonder, is this going to be yet another Chiefs playoff failure? And that's what a lot of people are thinking. The Colts are red hot right now. They're a better all-around team, and Andrew Luck, this will be like his 8th career playoff game. He's experienced the highs and lows of the postseason. This will be Mahomes' first, and again, the prime time, the big time games that the Chiefs have had this year, they keep falling flat on their face. And we know Andy Reid, even though he's won a lot of playoff games, it's just been the Super Bowl that's eluded him. Nonetheless, with the Chiefs, he's had a lot of struggles. So I just feel I feel really good about the Colts. I just think with Andrew Luck and company, this is as dangerous of a team in football right now. You got to watch out for them. And I just think Kansas City, their playoff history, their last home playoff win was, with Joe Montana and Marcus Allen in their backfield, January of '94 over the Steelers. So just not a very good home playoff history for KC. Not very good in the big games this year. So I just feel a lot better about the Colts. And then, of course, the late game with the Cowboys and the Rams. Ironically, the last time that the Rams in LA, forget all the St. Louis years, last time that the Rams in LA have won a home playoff game was January of '86 over the Cowboys, ironically. Last year, remember, they went into Dallas and they beat up on them pretty good. I think it was a pretty close game, final score-wise. They actually came back to win that game. But nonetheless, Todd Gurley ran all over the Cowboys' defense, which was, fairly decent last year as well. And Gurley himself, he missed the last couple games due to injury. The Rams' depth, it's really been tested this year, and they've done a good job with it because, Cooper Kupp, prolific wide receiver, he goes down with torn ACL. Their offense took a little bit of a step back for a little while, but Josh Reynolds, he stepped in. He replaced Robert Woods, who basically stepped into the Kupp role, and those guys both did really, really well. And, of course, C.J. Anderson, a Super Bowl champion veteran running back who was, out of the league. They signed him off the street a few weeks back, and a couple of really strong games to close out the regular season with Gurley out. And now Gurley's finally going to be back, and he's going up against a top 5 run defense. A great defensive mind and Chris Richard, who missed out on a head coaching job this year, but he was definitely a hot candidate and definitely somebody that is going to be a head coach in this league sooner than later. And so, one of those deals where is Gurley going to be healthy enough in this game, and can Gurley, can he have another big game against the Cowboys like he did last year, or will the Cowboys kind of, right those wrongs from the last time that they played him. Gurley, even missing those 2 games, still had 21 total touchdowns this year. A big thing, though, is Dallas's defense really likes to get pressure in your face, and you saw it against Russell Wilson. Really made Wilson very uncomfortable, and ultimately that was a big reason why the Cowboys were able to shut him down and win that game. That's been an issue for Jared Goff second half of this season. He's had a lot of not very good performances down the stretch, but I think playing a couple of lesser teams last couple of weeks of the regular season, playing the Niners, playing the Cardinals, I think that really helped him, and I think got his confidence back up. Played really well in Week 17. So I think it's going to be interesting to see, can Goff deal with the pressure? Because obviously Dallas will put a really good pass rush on him. Can he deal with the pressure, and can Dallas get to him? And obviously, where the Rams running game is going to look like. And then, the other side of it, Dak, we know how hit or miss he is. Dallas is a much better team at home than they are on the road, and so it's going to be interesting to see how they respond going on the road. It won't be the biggest disadvantage as far as being a road team, but nonetheless, you're still going to be away from the friendly confines of Jerry World. And so, Dak, way inconsistent. We know he can be all over the map. Can he put together a more complete game? Ezekiel Elliott, he's going against a run defense that gives up more yards per attempt than any team in the league, dead last for the Rams defense at 5.1 yards per carry. So can Dallas's top 10 ranked run game, can they continue to get the job done and have a big game against the Rams, take some pressure off of Dak in the process? And of course, Amari Cooper, who's been such a huge asset for them at receiver, he's going up against Marcus Peters. And if this was Kansas City Marcus Peters, which of course Amari Cooper has plenty of experience against back in his Oakland days, you'd feel pretty good about Peters. But the thing is, Marcus Peters has actually been one of the worst cornerbacks in football this year as a Ram, so that's advantage Cooper. So it's going to be interesting to see what he can do. Remember, Cooper had over 100 receiving yards last week against Seattle. Seattle secondary, pretty good secondary, couldn't shut him down. So it's going to be interesting, the coaching battles, because Sean McVay is clearly a better coach than Jason Garrett. And then defensively, I mentioned Chris Richard. He's going up against a legendary coach in Wade Phillips, the defense coordinator for the Rams. So a lot of kind of chess matches and a lot of, battles within, the game, games within the game. They're going to be interesting to watch. The Rams have 41 sacks this year, but exactly half of them, 20 and a half, are from Aaron Donald alone, the reigning defensive player of the year. So it's going to be interesting to see if Dallas's interior line, especially somebody like rookie Connor Williams, if he has to face him, how is he going to respond? And it's going to be interesting to see if they can shut him down. That's going to go a long way and allowing this Cowboy offense to have plenty of success on the road, control the clock, and have a good chance to win this game. But in the end, Rams are just a better all-around team. Goff, even with some of his recent struggles, I just trust him a lot more. And I think in the end, the Rams at home are just going to be way too much for Dallas, and the Rams will win by a touchdown. Dallas will barely cover the spread, but as far as winning the game, I trust the Rams a little bit more. So I like LA to find a way to win this game. Then on Sunday, of course, you have the Chargers and the Patriots. The thing it's pretty interesting about that game is they're calling for possibly 4 to 6 inches of snow in Foxborough, and we know that Tom Brady, he's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, but he's also one of the very best, maybe the best bad weather quarterbacks of all time. And he's played in some snowstorms at Foxborough, and he's balled out. So, it's going to be really interesting to see the Chargers, these California guys, can they adjust to that? How are they going to deal with that? How are they going to handle that? And that's going to be really, really intriguing. And then, of course, another big storyline is all the greatness of Tom Brady in the postseason. But then you think about Phillip Rivers, he's been around forever, and he hasn't had a whole lot of playoff success. He's like a 500 quarterback in the postseason, and he's been very mediocre. Even against the Ravens last week, had a lot of good moments, but he couldn't consistently get his team in the end zone. They had to keep settling for field goal after field goal. You're not going to be able to beat the Patriots with field goals, even some of the ups and downs New England has had. New England, I mentioned this before, this is their ninth straight first-round bye. They're also seeking their 8th straight AFC title game appearance, and so this is the worst team they've had during the stretch pretty much. And it's going to be interesting to see, can this team with some of their deficiencies, don't have a real true go-to receiver that you can trust. How's that going to work out for them against a pretty good Charger secondary and Charger defense that has a really good pass rush? This is a team that they lost Joey Bosa for half the season, and they still finished mid-pack in sacks. So just imagine if Bosa would have been healthy all year, they would have been top 5 or 10 in the league in sacks. So, Tom Brady has a quick release, but if the Chargers secondary does their job, maybe Brady's holding on to the ball a little bit longer than we're used to seeing, and then maybe guys like Bosa, Melvin Ingram, Uchenna Nwosu, the rookie out of USC who was the hero at the end of last week's game in Baltimore, maybe those guys step up and they get to Brady and get three or four sacks, and those could be game-changing sacks, especially if they're on third down. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Charger secondary can do enough against this Patriots, what's usually more of a short passing game, if they can make those stops, force Brady to hold it longer, because Brady, like a lot of quarterbacks, he doesn't like pressure. He gets very uncomfortable when you pressure him. We've seen past playoff games where he's struggled with that a little bit. So that's kind of a big opportunity for the Chargers. But the other side of it, Philip Rivers, again, because of his playoff history, he's going to have to really have, one of the best games of his career. He's going to have to not just throw for 300 yards, but, not turn it over, see if he can maybe throw 2 or 3 touchdown passes, lead a number of touchdown drives. So, again, it's going to be interesting to see how much the weather actually affects this game and how much that could affect the Charger game plan. Again, you got a second-year coach in Anthony Lynn. This is his first playoff game. He's already shown to be one of the better coaches in football. Can he outdo Belichick on Belichick's home turf? It's going to be a really, really interesting storyline there. Another big thing, too, you have to think about as well is, the Pats, they're unstoppable at home this year. Forget about all the success they've had in the playoffs and all the great seasons they've had at home in the past. This specific season here, 2018 season, they're 8-0 at home. So they're not very good on the road, but they're at home. That's why it was so important to get a first-round bye. They're at home for this one. Can they finally get knocked off in Foxborough? But the Chargers, who their home stadium feels like an away game anyways, feels like they play 16 away games, including the win at Baltimore last week, they're now 8-1 on the road this year. So the Chargers are road warriors, and they'd actually much rather be on the road than at home because they had 3 home losses. So, it's one of those deals. How's that going to play into it? We saw when the Giants, when they went on their Super Bowl runs in 2007 and 2011, when they ironically beat the Patriots both times, they were great road teams. And maybe the Chargers are one of those teams, they go on this road run all year long, especially in the postseason, and then they're able to get to the Super Bowl, and we'll see what happens in the big game. So obviously we'll see how that all goes. And then finally, last game is a game that's just as intriguing as the first 3. You've got the Eagles, the number 6 seed. They're at the number 1 Saints. Saints, they're unbeatable in Superdome in the Sean Payton era. Sean Payton, Drew Brees era, which dates back to 2006. They're 5-0 in the playoffs in the Superdome, whereas they're 0-5 in road playoff games. So, one of those deals that you take them out of the Superdome in the postseason in January, they're terrible. You keep them in the Superdome, which of course they have home field advantage throughout the playoffs this year, unstoppable. So if you're the defending world champion Eagles, you're on a run, you're hot right now. You've got Nick Foles as your quarterback. How do you find a way to knock off the Saints that are so unbeatable in the Superdome? Remember, mid-season, these two teams, and granted Carson Wentz was the quarterback back then, but mid-season, these two teams, they went head-to-head, and the Saints annihilated the Eagles 48-7. Nick Foles can't play defense, so it's going to be interesting. The Eagles' defense, postseason, so much on the line, they can't screw around. Can they make enough stops? Because the Saints' offense, since that game, soon after that game, their offense really fell off a cliff in some way. I don't want to say fell off a cliff, but definitely not nearly as good. Drew Brees started throwing more interceptions soon after that. So the Saints' offense hasn't been as unstoppable second half of the year. And, of course, now they got this bye. They rested all those starters week 17. So these guys might be a little bit rusty in the first half. and the Eagles may have a chance to take advantage of that. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see what, kind of transpires with that. Great quarterback matchup because, you got Foles, like I said, is red hot. 8 touchdown passes in his last 3 games. Led that game-winning drive late last week in Chicago. Obviously, they got a little bit of help, too, with the missed field goal at the end. But, he's doing a terrific job. And on the other side of it, Drew Brees, who for a while there was a favorite to win MVP, 74.4% completion percentage. He's doing a great job, even though he's, like I said, he's been a little bit more shaky second half of the season. Nonetheless, you have to give him a lot of credit for having another generally pretty strong year. Another interesting thing, Alvin Kamara has 18 total touchdowns. Speaking of Brees, he has 7 game-winning drives, which I believe leads the NFL. Michael Thomas, 125 catches, 1,405 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Another guy that, of course, gave the Eagles a lot of problems last time. So, the Saints, you have the most rushing touchdowns of anybody this year. Your offense is top 7 or 8 in all the big categories, top 5 in a lot of categories. Your defense is number 2 run defense in football. You're going up against an Eagles team that doesn't run the ball well. They don't stop the run very well. Maybe the Saints, that's how they win this game and take advantage. Maybe they run all over them, and, maybe they shut down what's already a pretty non-existent Eagles running game. So, those are some pretty interesting things to look at as well. Eagles secondary, they also lack in interceptions. And as far as the Saints, strong pass rush, 49 sacks, one of the top sack teams in the NFL this year. Cameron Jordan, 12 sacks. Defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins, 8 of his own. And one little fun fact, I talked about all these playoff games for Sean Payton and the Saints. The first playoff game for Payton and Brees was back in January of 2007 at home in the Superdome. It was a win over the Eagles, so I thought that was kind of ironic. But nonetheless, 4 really, really strong divisional playoff games, and it's going to be really kind of fun to see who wins these games and what the matchups look like, next week for conference championship game weekend, because any of these matchups, there's intrigue, there's going to be interest. It's not one of those things where you look at certain matchups and you say, oh, I don't want to see this team play that team or what have you. This is really one of those rare years where you look and say, any of these teams that come out of divisional playoffs are going to make for some great AFC and NFC championship games. So we'll see how it goes this weekend. But anyways, please go to sugarhuddle.com. Please like my Facebook page, which is obviously the Sugar Huddle, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you.